Hi, I'm Bray. I'm an Australian Geographic photographer, and I've also had my work bought by the likes of National Geographic and Discovery Channel, GoPro. And for the last 7 years, I've been running this photography course all around Australia, and I've finally got it together to put it online. So thanks for watching these videos. Before we get started though, I thought we'd take a quick look at my background, how I got to be kind of standing up here teaching you. So I actually grew up sailing around the world with my family on a homemade yacht for 5 years. So I was led to believe that constantly traveling and visiting all these amazing cultures and places, I just thought that was normal. I thought that was where everyone grew up. Apparently it's not. But life was one endless parade of photo opportunities, and I did start taking photos from when I was pretty young. That's my first ever camera, and that's a photo of me taking my very first photo. It's probably not, but I like to pretend that it is. But you can see the dolphin spectacularly leaping out of the water there. The problem is I've never actually seen that resultant photograph, so I'm pretty sure it didn't work out at all. I probably had all the wrong settings, probably still had the lens cap on, probably didn't even wind the film on. So it goes to show you're not born with any kind of great photographic talent, at least I certainly wasn't. It's more about the more you practice and the more you learn, the better you get. And hopefully courses like this one that you're watching will put you a whole lot further forward in what you can get out of your camera and just get so much more enjoyment from your passion. Now, I was so used to traveling everywhere that when we got home, the novelty of being stuck in the one spot wore off pretty quick, and I found myself doing a lot of active outdoor, hiking and things like that. This photo is from the Overland Track in Tasmania. It's a pretty popular summer trail, but it's a whole lot more fun in the middle of winter when it basically turns into a poor man's Antarctica. But still, my high school buddy and I still came across a few other people, and there was a little bit of rubbish on the track, and we were like, bah, what is this? This is not hiking. Hiking should be proper wilderness stuff where there's no one. So rather innocently, we decided it would be a great idea to try and hike from Port Davey up to Strahan. Now, I don't know how well you know your Tassie geography, but if you did, you'd know that that's a really stupid idea. But we didn't know that. We just thought it'd be great. So there's just a couple of 100 kilometres of World Heritage wilderness. There's not even any hiking trails there. So Australian Geographic gave me just enough money to buy my first real camera. It was still film, but at least it had things in it like a light meter and autofocus and that kind of stuff. And that's what inspired me to go away and read up on photography and dream of one day being an Australian Geographic photographer. So we got out there, and as you can see, it was pretty full on. It was just gradually mining our way through an endless ocean of banksia trees with a machete, giving it all we had for 10 or 11 hours a day, and then spending another hour hacking an area big enough to try and wedge the tent in there, climb inside and pull the GPS out and go, come on, how far have we gone? Beep, 800 meters. It was pretty soul-destroying kind of stuff. But in the end, the only way we could actually progress forward was to shimmy along the edges of the cliff face. So that's the Southern Ocean down there, and 30-kilo backpacks, and very much not rock climbing shoes. But just because the scrub on top was so impenetrable, there was just no way to get through it. Amazingly, we did actually make it out alive after about 30 days, and you can see by then I looked like a suitable candidate for a bit of World Vision sponsorship, because I based all my food intake on all the other hikes that I'd done, which were along recognised routes and trails and things like that. So it turns out you burn a lot more energy if you've got to cut your own path. Who'd have thought it? But the main thing was, when we came back, Australian Geographic gave us their Young Adventurer of the Year medal for that year, which then introduced us to the whole world of media and photos and selling photos. My first article was an article in Australian Geographic. They paid a little bit of money for it, not huge money, but it was enough to make me make that connection and go, gee, that's cool. You can go and do something fun, and then you can get paid for it. So that was about the same time I started to win a couple of photography competitions, and also the same time I graduated from university with my electrical engineering degree and put that bit of paper safely in the cupboard, which is where it stayed. Because by then I was having far too much fun doing all these cool adventures around the world, hauling carts, sort of like wheeled kayak things, across islands up in the Arctic. I actually wrote a book about the adventure called The 1,000-Hour Day, which sold really well, and you can still buy it through my website. There's also an ebook available. And there was an award-winning documentary made called The Crossing that even made it into mainstream cinemas around the country, so that was cool. You can buy that on the website as well. But for me, the most amazing part of the Arctic really was the photos you could take, particularly of wildlife, because a lot of the animals up there had never even seen humans before. And if we were walking along and an Arctic fox spotted us on the horizon, he'd kind of scamper over and stop right next to us and just stare at us and try and work out what we were. You can't help but get amazing photos then. Somewhat more exciting when a bunch of these things walk up to you. Arctic wolves. I actually got chased by a pack of 9 Arctic wolves on that first trip, which was pretty exciting. Having come back from that trip, it was quite easy then to get into the whole outdoor magazine industry. a very big feature for Australian Geographic and other magazines, not because I had any great photographic talent. It doesn't have to be technically a perfect photo, because, it's a photo of an Arctic wolf. It had that niche interest angle and went with a cool story. And that was my way into the industry, really, not through any formal training. It was more through the adventures and the photos of sharing those adventures. And then Canon made me their Australian ambassador for about 5 years, Australia's low pro ambassador. Low pro, of course, make cool camera bags, including the one in this picture, which is thankfully totally waterproof, because I'm pretty sure that is the world's dodgiest canoe. That was when I was on assignment for Australian Geographic up in Papua New Guinea. That was actually the first time they ever sent a photographer overseas on assignment. So that was really exciting, and I learned a huge amount on that trip. I've been able to be the judge of a lot of competitions, and that's actually really helped my own photography as well, because you've got to learn to be really pedantic about little niggly details like, oh, it's not pin sharp, or there's a little distracting element in the background there, they should have taken the photo from around here a little bit and got that out of shot, or composition's not quite right. And I can now apply all those thoughts to my own photography when I'm looking through the viewfinder and kind of correct my own photos before I take them. So that's really helped me as well. I've been lucky enough to be able to pick and choose different assignments. I went to Borneo for a month to try and find some of the rarest animals in the world and get photos of them, which was great. So slowly but surely, my list of customers just started to grow and included National Geographic and Discovery Channel, Low Pro, GoPro, Canon, and so on. And then while all this was going on, we actually set off on another adventure. My back then girlfriend, but now wife, Jess, and I bought a really old wooden sailing boat, which is something you should never do. But we didn't know that. We spent a couple of months rebuilding it, completely ripped out the inside and got it all ready, put it in the water and decided to sail it through the Northwest Passage. So that's over the top of Canada and Alaska, through the Bering Strait and down the other side. Turns out no one's ever tried to take a boat quite that stupid through the Northwest Passage before, so that was quite an amazing adventure. Perhaps the most amazing thing was that Jess had never even been sailing before. She'd never even been on a sailing boat. So she obviously had a really steep learning curve, but she's amazing. As you can see, it's not really the easiest place in the world to learn how to sail. Pretty brutal weather. That's the Bering Strait there, that infamous little gap between Russia and Alaska. That's where they filmed that reality TV program, The Deadliest Catch. Completely irresponsible part of the world to take a little wooden sailing boat, really. But the photos you get do kind of make up for it. This is probably my favorite one of the whole trip, with our little sailboat passing behind a beautifully arched iceberg that we found in Greenland. Just amazing. And of course, the wildlife up there, as always, is amazing. Polar bears. There was one island where we could count about 10 polar bears on this one little sand spit, and I rode up as close as I dared to get some cool photos. But then I wanted to get some close-up video, so I put a little GoPro camera on a float and tied it to my fishing line, rode up close as I could, and then put it in the water and let it drift in. Kind of hoped a polar bear might walk past. But one actually saw it and came right up to it and went, what are we going to do with this thing? Maybe we'll just chew it to pieces. And I obviously wanted the camera back and I didn't want him to swallow it. So I was there trying to get his attention, distract him in any way I could, shouting and clapping my hands and slapping on the water with the dinghy oars. But finally he saw me and went, oh yes, that looks much more tasty out there. But I managed to get the camera back and get away before we got eaten, so that was good. Further on down the coast of Alaska, we got into this bay where it was just full of brown bears catching salmon. So many bears. They were just so engrossed in catching the salmon that you could just safely sit there and they would come right past, pouncing on fish, sometimes so close you get splashed, and they just couldn't care less about you being there. It was the most incredible photography experience I've ever had. But it was actually back in 2008. I was on a cruise ship heading down to Antarctica as their official photographer, and I just noticed that there were so many guests on board that all had amazing camera gear, but almost no idea how to use them. They were just wasted on auto mode. And I was like, that's such a shame. These people are spending a fortune and going on a once-in-a-lifetime holiday, and they're going to come back with substandard photos. So more just out of boredom than anything else, on the journey south, I decided to make a quick photography course, just a quick crash course. And I presented it to everyone who wasn't seasick at the time, and everyone said, this is fantastic. I love the way you teach. It's really simple and practical. And they then said, when is the next course? When we come back to Australia, when can we book into the next one? And I was just thinking, actually, I haven't got the dates organized yet, but if you'd like to add your email address to the list, I'll let you know as soon as I've got it organized. And so when we got home, that's what I did. I spent the next 3 months designing what I hope would be the ultimate one-day photography course, combining practical elements and theory and holding it in beautiful venues like zoos and botanical gardens and other function centers. And these courses just took off. They're really popular. So we have a course notes booklet, which is like the entire content of the day into one little color booklet that you can keep in your camera bag. And it's designed so that you can reread it, and it should make total sense. You don't need to remember anything that I've said. You don't need to sit there writing everything down. So that's great. And we also have these summary clip cards, just a little plastic set of cards with all the most important stuff from the day boiled down to these couple of little cards. And you might click that onto the neck strap of your camera. And then just whenever you need reference to it, you can be like, oh yeah, which way do you scroll your F number to do what with your depth of field, or why are my photos all blurry? Got a little troubleshooting thing, lighting. It's got all the really important stuff just in these little durable little cards. So you can buy these through my website as well. So the business just grew and grew, and we now have a whole team of people around Australia working for us. And we've just taught this course so many times that I think now is the right time to put it online, because we're actually now far too busy running photography tours. Now, the idea behind these tours is that they're basically just a normal holiday to a normal bucket list destination like Alaska or Antarctica, Kenya, Galapagos, but they're with a really small group of like-minded people. So you're only traveling with about 8 people normally, and we charter our own planes and helicopters and really small expedition cruise ships that can get into the little places where the bigger boats don't go. We take our guests sort of off the beaten path to beautiful little corners of the world, often that we've discovered ourselves by maybe sailboat, like the place with all the bears. We now take tour groups there. But importantly, you're traveling with professional photographers who are there purely to help you improve your photography and get better photos. You know, if you're having a problem with your camera, or how do I make this better, or why is it blurry, what could I do better? That's what we're there to help you out. So hopefully after you've finished watching this photography course, you'll consider joining us on one of our photo tours. So that's it for my background. Before you get stuck into actually learning, I thought I'd give you a heads up as to the structure of the course that you're in for. So we start with a really easy lecture on basic photography. That's just things like, setting your camera up, getting it ready, holding the camera really steady, holding it properly, things like that. Then we look at composition. That's basically just what are you looking for when you look through the viewfinder on your camera? How do you organize stuff in your photos so that it just feels more balanced or just more aesthetic? Then we look at exposure. Sometimes the photos come out a bit too bright or a bit too dark. Why does that happen? How do you fix it up? Quick little look at histogram graphs and things like that. Then we look at aperture and what that does to your depth of field. And then shutter speed and how that affects things that are moving in your photos. And then we look at ISO and what's that all about. Lighting. Lighting, of course, there's so much to learn about lighting in photography, but just understanding the basics of it, like the different types of lighting and the different directions of lighting, that can be an enormous improvement to your photography. Lenses, there's obviously so many different types of lenses in the world. Good to have a bit of a handle on how you categorize them, how you know what they do, what you need, what you don't, and so on. And then we'll finish up with a lecture on just practical advice, just bits and pieces I'd hate for someone to be able to do a photography course and not be told. Everything from a little bit on post-production to keeping your camera clean, and where to from here, and that sort of thing. So thanks very much for watching this lecture series, and I hope you enjoy. And again, hopefully one day we'll see you on a photo tour.